Cathy, have you ever heard the one about the estate planning attorney?
No, tell me.
All right, so this older man who had quite a sizable fortune went into an estate planning attorney to have his estate redone because he had just gotten remarried. And the attorney is taking him through these questions, and he says, "How old are you?" And he says, "I'm 75. And he says, "Okay. And how old is your bride?" And he said, 25. And he says, "What? What does she do for a living?" "She's a model." "You married a 25-year-old model and you're 75? How in the world did you ever manage to get away with that?" And he says, "Well, to tell you the honest truth, I lied about my age." And he said, "Really? How old did you tell her you were?" And he said, 95.
And for those of you who don't get the joke, it means she thought he would pass away very soon.
And how many times have we heard stories about people marrying for money or marrying a much older or much younger woman, and there's always some ulterior motive that is imputed? You know, there was a story I heard of. Man died in a tragic accident, and his wife inherited the farm. And she was still young, and the kids were old enough to not want her to remarry because they were afraid that her new husband might get the family farm. Kind of a sad story. She ended up dying single.
Well, and we've seen people in our own geographical area who they were older, they'd both been married before, and they got even engaged, and they were getting prepared to move in together and get married, and the kids started basically not trusting her and not wanting her to be part of their dad's life, or they were fearful that that would take their inheritance away. Do you remember that? This was in our own ward, actually, in our own church branch. Like, it was really sad for me because she really loved him, and I don't think she was after his money. So it also can be the other way around, where there's suspicion of it, but it's not there. And then what? The parents need to stay single the rest of their lives to make sure that their children get an inheritance?
I like the movie Out to Sea. It's not necessarily the best one with Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau, but anything with Lemmon and Matthau is great, right? And anyway, there's a time when Walter Matthau says to Jack Lemmon, who's a widower, he's trying to get him to start dating, and the Jack Lemmon character says, but Susie isn't here anymore, right? She's gone. And Walter Matthau says, "But you're not gone. You're still here. You still have life to live. That's why they invented death." And of course, being in the business of encouraging love in later years, we are sympathetic to people who have lost a spouse, either through death or divorce, at having an opportunity to move on and make themselves happy in the best way they can.
The central dilemma is, how do you honor your late spouse, protect your assets, and still have the freedom to remarry without tearing your family apart?
Cathy, I'd like to introduce our audience to a bold but often overlooked idea. Children are not entitled to an inheritance. My children are not entitled to my money. I'm not entitled to my parents' money. The people who earned it and put it away and saved it are the ones who are primarily entitled to enjoy it. Now, if I do get something from my parents when they pass on, great. I'm grateful. I'm appreciative of that. But I don't think I should be in a position to demand it.
I agree. And it's also not a good retirement strategy at all.
Right. I mean, if you need your parents to die so you can retire, that's kind of a morbid idea. It's sort of like being Prince William or something.
Well, and besides that, it tears families apart when we don't take responsibility for ourselves and we think we're entitled to something and everyone thinks they're entitled to something and it doesn't go their way. Then there's big family squabbles. I mean, I've seen decades of hate and anger and frustration and negativity and even lawsuits in many families. And I think if we even just adopted that one thought, that we're not entitled to it, and we plan our lives accordingly, I think there would be a lot less strife.
Yeah, 100%.
So the question is, whose money is it anyway? The ownership of wealth is the assets earned by the person who earned them, just like you said, not the children who might feel entitled, but it's not their money.
A second principle, we need to distinguish between entitlement and a legacy. Inheritance is a gift. It's not a guarantee. Like I said, I'll appreciate it if I get an inheritance from my parents. I'll be grateful to them for providing that. But I think it's unseemly and ungrateful in a way to be, grasping for that and trying to get them to live their lives differently so I can inherit more.
Oh, yeah. And I think it's really sad when people can't have love in their lives, or they feel they can't because their kids are so adamant that that's going to too negatively impact them. Should you avoid remarrying just to preserve an inheritance? I think there's a way of both honoring what your previous, maybe deceased partner might have wanted for the kids, and being able to move on and live your life and be with a partner and not have to be alone the rest of your life. We're challenging that myth that remarriage automatically compromises a children's financial future, because I don't think it has to.
As a lawyer, I can tell you there are legal mechanisms such as setting up trusts and prenuptial agreements and things like this that can help to keep your assets separate, the ones that are really important, so that your kids end up inheriting what they would have inherited anyway, and your spouses, same thing. Every situation is very different. I'm not going to try to give legal advice on this show, but I do want to say that there are mechanisms so that you don't have to feel worried that your parents' new husband or new wife is going to end up taking the family farm or whatever it is.
I really like how we did it. We did a
yours, mine, and ours?
Oh, yeah, we do have a yours, mine, and ours situation in our family. And I think you and I really like it that way. We love building our joint net worth, and we also like maintaining some separateness. I think it's good for us. And when we got married, we did a very special kind of prenuptial that is called
covenant marriage, which for Latter-day Saints, we understand what a covenant is in the religious sense, but this kind of covenant marriage also includes that, for example, if either one of us ever thinks we want a divorce, we've agreed to do at least 6 months of marriage counseling before we go there.
So this kind of prenuptial agreement actually puts into place protections for the marriage and the commitment you're making, the covenants you're making with each other, rather than just saying what you'll do in case of divorce.
Right. And it's to try to prevent divorce and to also impress upon the minds of both people involved the sanctity of that marriage they're entering into. For two people like us this is our third marriage, both of us, I think that helps a little bit to have thought that through and say, no, this time we both want it to be different.
Right. That and the peace of mind that comes from knowing that as a single mom with minor children, I still had the ability to funnel funds into accounts that would allow me to continue caring for them no matter what was going on with us. Also, the peace of mind, like we said, where we've got the yours, mine, and ours. Prenuptials can be a really great tool also for knowing how you're going to function in the marriage moving forward financially.
So you can have individual trusts and family trusts, some sort of mix and match depending on your situation. Like I said, I won't advise you of that on this show, but go see a good attorney if both of you have assets and you're remarrying and you need protection.
And if you want to learn about covenant marriage contracts, you can actually Google them and learn a little more about them on your own.
I think you want to have a conversation with adult kids, right, Cathy, before you start dating, and make it about no specific person. And I will just say, my kids weren't adults when I got divorced. They were both teenagers, but I thought they were old enough for me to have this conversation with them. And I'll say something nice about them here too. I told them, guys, I think it's time for me to start dating, and I ultimately I'm going to want to remarry. And I said, I think it's time for me to take that step. And I said to both of them, now, if either of you has any concerns about anyone I'm dating, I will listen to you, I will take you seriously, and I will think about whatever you have to say. But you don't get a vote. I'm still going to marry who I decide to marry for my own reasons. To their credit, they were very welcoming of all of my dating partners, knowing ultimately it was my decision whether and when and whom to marry. And I think if you have that conversation at the outset and you set expectations, then the kids don't start scheming, hoping you're going to get back together with your ex or, whatever else they might have in mind with that.
Well, and I had young children, and so I just chose to include them in my dating life, and occasionally they'd offer an opinion, but they were also very welcoming. And I've asked them in retrospect as they've grown if they liked that, and they said they did. They liked being involved in the process and making new friends along the way, and ultimately knowing you long before we got married. Moving on to another topic we wanted to discuss real quick is how to protect a late spouse's money for your children, if you choose to.
Yeah, and we've talked about trusts and prenuptial agreements, and in many cases, a will is something you want to have in conjunction with your trust.
And we're going to advise everyone, including ourselves, to make sure it's current.
That's right. And I will say, if you have doubts, find a good estate planning attorney. You should probably each be represented separately, but each have the agreement looked over by a competent professional, and that'll just make it easier so there's fewer questions and you know how you're going to manage things through the years. I will tell you this, I was a little nervous to start having money conversations with Cathy before we got married because I just was afraid that we might not agree and it could be a deal breaker. There might be all these horrible things that would happen. And I'm going to tell you, if that had happened, that should have happened. It didn't happen, wasn't horrible, and I'm glad we're together. But if you can't talk about money, that's a big red flag. Put your relationship to the test. See if you can do it. And if you can talk about money and agree on some basic principles you're going to use to manage it together and deal with those issues, then maybe you got a decent shot. But don't avoid it because you're afraid it's going to torpedo the relationship. Because if it would torpedo the relationship, it probably should.
And if you don't talk about it, it might anyway.
Right, and it might do it after you're even more invested.
So Jeff, how do we protect ourselves from being married for money?
Well, all I had to do at the time was talk to you and let you know what my financial situation was to avoid that. But if you do have money, let's recognize a few of the red flags. Beware of being rushed. Now, I've heard Cathy readily admit that, not necessarily from a financial standpoint, but she kind of was in a hurry to get married after her first divorce because she didn't know how to be alone. And anybody that is rushing you to get married because maybe they need help taking care of their kids or they need help financially, that's one of the red flags we got to worry about.
Also, another one is excessive interest in your finances. I mean, the one thing that I did with Jeff is that because I did have some money, I didn't really tell anybody I dated about that unless it became really serious.
Yeah, you did tell me well ahead of our wedding, but not until the relationship was exclusive and getting more serious.
Of course, you can take legal and practical safeguards as you go into the marriage, and also keeping financial boundaries and maintaining separate accounts as desired and having that be an equal playing field.
Especially if you're widowed and your former spouse had some money put aside, making sure you preserve your kids' interest in that can help to avoid conflict later on.
Also, always be sure to trust, but also verify information that you're given and not just take it always for granted. One last question, Jeff. How do we avoid the temptation to marry for money ourselves?
I will say that as an attorney, I've had people come into my office and say, how do I get money from my ex-husband? He's not paying his child support. Okay, well, what does he do for a living? Well, right now he doesn't really do anything, but he has had 5 jobs in the last year and they pay minimum wage or whatever. And, he's got substance abuse problems and all he does all day is sit around and play video games and look at porn. And I've said very candidly to them, get yourself a career. You are grasping to get blood from a stone, to get money from a guy who ain't ever going to have any.
So, short answer, make sure that you know how to take care of yourself financially. And that
Exactly.
is just really smart, not only to not put yourself in a position where you have to either marry for money or stay married in a bad situation for money. Also, when you have your own career, when you each have your own separate interests and ability to care for yourself, I think it's a better and more healthy relationship anyway.
I think it's more balanced, yeah. And then you're not trying to grasp at straws for how to get a drug-addicted, dysfunctional person to pay for your life. In conclusion, just to recap a few themes that we've talked about, your life, your love, and your legacy are yours to manage. They're not your children's to control. Plan wisely, communicate clearly, and prioritize the relationship over resentment.
And on a hopeful note, with love, wisdom, and boundaries, families can thrive, even in the face of remarriage and financial transition.
That's right. And remember, anytime, especially a time of remarriage later in life, is a great time for more love in your life.
Remember to like and subscribe, and
Thanks for
watching.
This video is sponsored by New Calm, an app that will support you in living your best life. Feeling stressed? No matter what your day throws at you, in just a few minutes you can feel recharged, centered, and ready to go. Try it for yourself and feel the difference. Click on the link in our video description. Thanks for joining us for another week on LilyTube. If you enjoy what you see, support us by liking, commenting, and sharing your favorite videos with others who could benefit.
As single life and relationship coaches, our mission is to help single adults intentionally heal from loss to create a happy life and healthy relationships. Keep coming back and we'll keep you encouraged. Each week, we provide new and refreshing perspectives on the challenges and opportunities of mid-single life.
If you'd like to immerse yourself deeper into your own personal development and relationship journey, visit our website at loveinlateryears.com for even more resources. Don't take on divorce recovery and other relationship loss and single life alone. We are here for you.